Welcome to Art House Legends, where high art and geek culture collide. This is the MovieDude Eric, that strange voice in the ventilators telling you to do inappropriate things.
And my name is Chris Tondevold.
In this episode, we're discussing 12 Monkeys, starring Bruce Willis, Brad Pitt, Madeleine Stowe, Christopher Plummer, David Morse, and directed by Terry Gilliam. All right, so I have to admit it's been a while since I've discussed a Terry Gilliam movie, and I gotta ask right off the bat, what is your opinion on Terry Gilliam as a director and as an artist?
His visuals are always very cool. I don't remember seeing a whole lot of the stuff. The Brazil I saw years and years and years ago. But everything, and you even see it in 12 Monkeys, seeing this again, because this was always a standout for me. Just the different angles and the different art styles, and that, like, the future for him and the space is always so weird and very a dreadful place. It's not something that you want to live in. The future is not hopeful, I feel like.
Well, I feel like when it comes to Terry Gilliam's directorial work, he definitely creates environments that are I don't want to say they're without hope, but you get this sense that hope is absurd in his world.
Right.
And so I think that's kind of a trademark for Terry Gilliam. I appreciate that to an extent, because other filmmakers tend to either try to make depressing looking movies or movies that are too upbeat. I feel like he finds kind of this side angle between those that works. And we'll definitely be talking about that when it comes to 12 Monkeys specifically. But I gotta say, this has been a while since I've seen 12 Monkeys. I think the last time I seen it was about 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I mean, this is a movie that has stuck with me quite a bit. I was actually I had seen the trailer for 12 Monkeys when I went and saw GoldenEye in theaters.
Oh wow!
And so I was intrigued by it. I couldn't see it when it came out because I was 15 at the time. So I couldn't see it right away. But when it came out on VHS at my local Blockbuster, this was an immediate rent. And I gotta say, I was a little confused by this movie. And it's not the usual things that would normally confuse me. But I gotta say that I just didn't understand at the time that I saw it. That changed. Every time that I've seen it, I've caught more, and I understand now the influences that Terry Gilliam brought to this. But I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't bring up that this is actually a remake. Have you ever heard of or seen La Jetée?
No, and it's funny because I think I've only really seen 12 Monkeys on TV a lot, and I think the last time I sat down and watched like a DVD of it or something like that was years and years ago, kind of your same story. I never remember that title sequence. Mm-hmm. So watching the credits and realizing that it is actually based off of something else, now I am very, very, very interested in watching that or reading that, whatever it is, because I had no idea.
Well, believe it or not, you can actually see La Jetée, the inspiration for 12 Monkeys, on the Criterion Channel. It is a short film. I want to say it's about 30 minutes long. And it's really unique because the film itself is actually a whole bunch of still pictures with narration going over it. And it's telling a story about a man who goes back in time to stop a disaster. But the thing is that all the pictures are modern. There's no real science fiction to the pictures themselves. The pictures,
they're all contemporary.
All contemporary at the time. It was made in the 60s.
Okay.
That said, though, La Jetée is a very interesting movie. I'm not going to say good. I feel like, especially when it comes to French New Wave, it's inventive, but it feels lazy, if I may say so. So I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But I will also say, though, that this film is a unique monster, because not only are we talking about this being a Terry Gilliam film, but this was written by one of the screenwriters in Hollywood. Have you ever heard of have you ever heard of David Webb Peoples?
No.
David Webb Peoples. I'm just going to list his movies, and maybe you'll understand why I say he's one of the great screenwriters of all time.
Okay.
We're talking about Blade Runner. We're talking about Unforgiven. And of course, that seminal science fiction classic that is Soldier.
That's a pretty good. Wow, that's really weird, because you have Blade Runner, Unforgiven, and then this weird ass Soldier movie. Okay.
Have you ever seen Soldier? I'm curious. I think
that I have. Yeah. Okay. So this was before Universal Soldier, or this was Universal Soldier?
No, we're talking about Soldier. Kurt Russell.
Okay, so it's not the one. I feel like I have, but it's not the one that I'm thinking of.
You know what? We'll talk. We're gonna talk, because if you have not seen Soldier, you are missing out. But also, just to kind of give you a few more that maybe you've seen, maybe you haven't. But if you haven't, I would probably suggest that you see it. He did a movie called Leviathan, which was a part of that whole underwater craze with The Abyss and Deep Star 6. The Abyss is obviously the best of the three, but Leviathan is pretty damn good. Lady Hawk, the Matthew Broderick time travel to the Middle Ages movie.
Yeah.
Hero, not the Jet Li movie, but the Dustin Hoffman, Andy Garcia, Gina Davis movie, which is about an ordinary schlub who does something extremely heroic and then walks away without anyone noticing, and then the media is looking for him. But he's like, he's like this really terrible human being because Dustin Hoffman. But yes, so David Webb Peoples is an incredible screenwriter, and is one of those screenwriters that I feel like didn't get the appreciation that he deserved. And especially when you look at 12 Monkeys, Blade Runner, Unforgiven. Unforgiven, in my opinion, is the best of those three in the screenplay department. But, you know, David Webb Peoples has earned his place as a genuinely great screenwriter, in my opinion. But I'm surprised that you've never heard of him, to be honest. Or maybe I shouldn't be, because, you know, he's only made those movies, and usually that means that people haven't heard of you and they don't hire you. So maybe that's it.
Well, it's weird, because you would think that he would be more prevalent, especially nowadays. But when you look at the 90s and early 2000s, if he's working off of Unforgiven and Blade Runner didn't really pick up steam until, you know, the 90s and early 2000s, where it was that big cult kind of classic in there, and it definitely flopped during its time in the theaters. Mm-hmm. So I think that's interesting, to where you have the person that wrote that movie isn't really the one that picked up steam for it. It is the director and the actors that got it, rather than actually him.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about 12 Monkeys specifically. And I feel like let's start off with David Webb Peoples, because David Webb Peoples actually worked with his wife on the screenplay before Terry Gilliam got involved, and he was inspired by La Jetée. And then it gets picked up by Terry Gilliam, who loved the story that was put behind this. And this was Terry Gilliam at the height. This was Terry Gilliam, who was who everyone was wanting to work with at this particular point. In fact, all the cast in this movie took pay cuts from their normal rates in order to be in this movie. That's how big Terry Gilliam is. And you can tell that this is definitely a passion project for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you also have, so these actors are coming off really big movies for themselves. Mm-hmm. And this was, I mean, Brad Pitt just did Pulp Fiction the year before this came out.
Brad Pitt wasn't.
Not Brad Pitt, Bruce Willis. Yeah. I was like, what are you talking about? Yeah, no, I got the other, yeah, whatever. Bruce Willis just came off of Pulp Fiction the year before. Mm-hmm. And then Brad Pitt did Seven, I think the same year that this came out too.
Yeah, he did. He was off of Seven. Although I'm surprised that you didn't bring up Die Hard with a Vengeance.
No, sure. I mean, that's fine. I forgot what year that movie came out of, so it's fine.
Nah, it's okay. But no, so yeah, I mean, and so this is a movie that has a very interesting pedigree. Bruce Willis is not really, at this particular time, for doing psychological thrillers. You know, he's an action man. So when you go to see a Bruce Willis movie, you go to see him punch somebody. And you do kind of see him punch somebody here. But this is this requires him to actually act. And I gotta say, especially when you compare it to the other things that he's acted in, this is actually a performance, I want to say.
That's what I was thinking rewatching that this is probably the most range that he's had in a movie, I feel like, because he does so much. He does, obviously, the acting by itself as far as the emotions go, but even the physical acting of it, it's not that action star, yippee-ki-yay. It is very completely different because he's playing a mental patient going through everything, a crazy person going through everything, and then it's in a completely different environment than what he's used to as well.
Yeah. And I honestly think that this actually works to Bruce Willis's benefit for this particular film. Because one thing that I found out in researching is that Terry Gilliam outright told Bruce Willis, there are 15 things that you do in every one of your other movies you are not allowed to do in this movie. And honestly, I mean, with other movies, I'm pretty sure, especially in his career now where he doesn't care, he would have basically thrown it into someone's face and then walked out. But the thing is he took that direction to heart. And you actually see him staying away from those tropes. He doesn't do the smoldering look. He doesn't do the quip. He doesn't. It kind of reminds me of the film adaptation of 1984 with John Hurt, where he, where he feels stripped down. He feels out of his league. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if Bruce Willis had, to help him with his performance, stayed up way too late and kind of sleep deprived himself a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't do that, because he looks disheveled. He looks uncomfortable. He looks like he's on the edge of his rope, and especially for how this character is, and the fact that the audience doesn't really know if we can trust him or not through the film.
Right, because you don't know if he's actually sane or not sane, or the other side of that is if he's going to be a bad guy or not. Like, he could just say no to everything and just kind of live his life and be as selfish as possible.
But I don't think that's really it for the character. And I think what I really appreciate, especially from a Terry Gilliam perspective, is that not only does this movie have a visual flair, a visual style that kind of goes towards Brazil, which in my opinion is the best of his films, even better than this one, but it also kind of tackles the things that were brought up in The Fisher King, which we've also talked about on Art House Legends. Out of curiosity, have you seen The Fisher King?
I don't think so, because that's kind of... I'm thinking of Jacob's Ladder. No, I haven't seen Fisher King, no.
Well, Fisher King, I mean, for a recap for anyone who's never seen Fisher King is about a shock jock radio who loses his job, played by Jeff Bridges, who comes across a dissociative person played by Robin Williams, who believes that he's in this fantasy land going after the Black Knight. And this is in modern day New York, or 80s New York.
Okay.
It is one of the most perspectives on mental illness, I think, that was made up to that particular... and especially with Robin Williams' performance, as well as Terry Gilliam truly respecting mental illness. And I think that's something that is very unique for Gilliam. This is a man who's made a lot of movies about mental illness in one fashion or form. And I think what makes him good for that, maybe that his time on Monty Python, let's be honest here, that could have a part to play in that. But I also think it's because of his worldview about the absurdity of the world. You get the sense that he feels that the world is absurd, and you kind of have to be crazy to navigate it. And so when he's tackling mental illness, he almost kind of tackles it as though they're the sane ones and everyone else isn't. And I kind of dig that about this movie. Because
it makes it feel a lot more real, right?
Well, not just more real, but what I think, especially with Cole, with Bruce Willis's character, what Cole is going through is a completely not what he wants. He does not want to be in the positions that he's in. He is forced to go. He's forced to go on this mission. Now, with that said, I guess I want to put a caveat here, a bit of a hashtag, or not hashtag, but a mark right here. We don't know if Cole is legitimately a time traveler, or if he is mentally ill, and he and he's just believing that he is a time traveler. Up to this particular... later on, the film is definitely going to answer that question. And I don't think that's for the best, to be honest. I think it would have been better if we still did not know by the end of the movie whether or not he was one or the other. But, especially for Cole, since he has absolutely no control over any of this. Either way, if he's mentally ill, he's controlled by his illness. If he is a time traveler, especially the way that the film puts it, he's being forced because he's a prisoner. And I have to admit, I did kind of take a chuckle as to the reasons why he is a prisoner. Because he defies authority and he had aggressive sex. Or no antisocial sex.
Yeah.
I thought that was a very unique crime. I would have loved to be in that courtroom when he was charged, because
and that prison is probably the most harrowing prison that I've seen, because they are stacked on top of each other, on top of each other, on top of each other the entire way through. And
that is definitely a Terry Gilliam thing. That you could tell that this is coming from definitely some mushroom.
Right. Because even I remember watching it the first time and not paying attention to kind of the setup of him going on the little scavenger mission, right? So even the suit that he's in and the whole aesthetic of that underground future that we're in is just crazy to me, because it's so claustrophobic. Everything is so tightly packed, and you're really treating people legitimately just like animals in a cage.
That's true. Sidebar, maybe we should make this clear, that this movie is set up on the basis of an outbreak that sends humanity underground. This is now the second movie Art House Legends has tackled within our current health crisis involving a plague. Next up will be Prince of Egypt. After that, I'm thinking Contagion, Andromeda Strain. We got to keep this up, man, right? I mean, there's a whole bunch of plague movies out there. Maybe we'll even go TV and do the Stephen King The Stand if you have like 12 hours to invest in it.
They're supposed to be doing a remake of that, and I'm ready for it, but at the same time, I don't think I have that amount of time to invest into anything like that.
Well, I'm pretty sure they'll do it in the limited series thing, like they did Watchmen and stuff like that. So that would be cool for me. I'm okay. But then again, I'm a huge Stan fan. But so a plague is the thing that we are. That is the setup for this future. Humanity has been put underground. And I love the fact that they use a quote to start this off. And I love the fact that, technically speaking, they make it out to be like one of those quotes that you would normally find and at the beginning of books that is from like some real source. Mm-hmm. But is basically what Cole tells the doctors in the mental institute or in the hospital when he's being interrogated. So basically, I like the fact that they use that. It's like 10 seconds. It doesn't feel like exposition. It feels like just a good way to start a movie. Just a quick quote and then move in. And because that quote is in our heads right off the bat, we have already kind of invested of what the situation is. When he goes out and he's in the suit, we're not asking ourselves, well, he's just in a dumb suit. But we realize, no, this is because there's a virus, and especially when he's collecting animals, it sets that up so that it doesn't feel like it's out of left field. Right. But I will say, though, I did find it very interesting. We have the brown bear that he comes across, and then when he goes back to 1996, he finds the window dressing of the brown bear. And
this movie does such a great job, like knowing how it ends and seeing it before, and then you putting fresh eyes on it again and paying attention to it. It does such a good job kind of foreshadowing or leading to other parts and really setting up that split between the future, the past, the present, and then also the split between crazy and sane.
Yeah.
Because all the stuff that you're seeing, like the lion on top of a building, which is always fun. I every time I see that, I just like, what is happening in life? And then you realize that going forward when you see the rest of it, the window dressing for the bear, there's a statue for the lion later on. Mm-hmm. It's really cool that they interwove that stuff in there to get you to think back of what you saw before. And then opening it with that quote and you realizing, oh, that's a bigger part later on in the movie too. It's a really cool way to play with time travel too, I think, and to get kind of that closed loop in there.
Yeah. And I did find it fascinating. Another thing that they did a really interesting job of setting up was Juan, his cellmate, or the guy in the cell next to him. Because, he's only on screen for like 2 seconds. And we'll see him again later. But, like, in a way, for the first time you're watching it, you're not going to be noticing him. It feels like Gilliam put that in there for the second screening. Like, when you know that it's going to happen and that you're paying more attention the second time. Because Juan has, like, one line. We don't spend enough time with Juan to know who he is. And we're also being blocked by that cage. So we can't really tell. And, no offense to John Cena, but he doesn't have the most recognizable face. Like, if that were Willem Dafoe,
right.
and then Willem Dafoe shows up, then we know, oh yeah, that's Willem that was the Willem Dafoe that was in the cage. John Cena does not have that kind of uniqueness to his appearance, so you're not figuring that out until the second time that you But I do love how it does set all this stuff up within the first 10 minutes. It does a really good job of utilizing that first 10 minutes to introduce you to the situation before we get into the 1990 section. There's one other thing that I have to admire about this movie, and this is the same thing that was also kind of introduced in Brazil as well, and it's the incompetence of the people in charge. They don't even get time travel correct. And I love that, to be honest. And one of my biggest complaints, one of the first time I saw it is that they say, that one of the things that Cole says is, when I go into the past, I can't change anything, so I'm not going to try. And the thing is that by the end of the movie, they're trying to change things. Right?
Right.
But the thing is anyone who's ever seen a time travel movie ever knows that once you're in the past, that is now your present. You have the ability to manipulate things. Now, the question at that particular point is, whatever I manipulate has already existed. Therefore, all I'm doing is fulfilling prophecy. Right? I'm fulfilling what is going to be in the future. You can make that argument that you can't change that. But this film doesn't believe in that. Or let's put it this way. The ending indicates that despite them knowing that they are, quote unquote, that they can't change the past, they're still trying to anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that goes to the incompetence. Either you can't change the past, and therefore, all you can do is just investigate and possibly kill off half of humanity on top of that. Mm-hmm. Or you can't change it because it's already happened, and therefore you sending other people to try to change it means that you're just being stupid, or you're enabling that future that you're trying to stop. And in my opinion, I think that's the true genius of the ending, to be honest.
Yeah, I like the fact that it's a closed loop. And the other thing with that too is I think my favorite setup or line in here is that science isn't an exact science. So
I love that line too. Or no, science is not an exact science for these clowns. Again,
right? Yeah, that's what it is.
To the incompetence of the people in charge. And again, you've seen Brazil, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
The fact that one single fly was capable of condemning a family man who's done nothing wrong. This emphasizes that take on that pessimistic take that Terry Gilliam has about control and power of sorts. And yet, at the same time, though, can we also be honest that when it comes to Bruce Willis's quarantine suit, how many people do you think today would have killed to have that suit?
My whole thing when I was looking at that, I was like, that cannot be warm. You're in a winter apocalypse. There's no way that can be warm. No matter all the latex that you wear will not help that. That's
true. But okay, yes, go ahead.
Sorry. But no, I dug everything with the play of time and the fact that it keeps building and building. And when you're watching this movie, you can actually kind of see the ripples of what he's doing, right? Mm-hmm. So when he first goes to 1990 and he realizes it's the wrong time, it feels like that sets off the series of events for literally everything else in the movie.
It kind of does, which I like. But also, it kind of goes back to the incompetency of the people in charge. He was supposed to go to 96. They sent him to 1990. Everything that they set up for him is in 1996, not in 1990. So, and the only reason why they pull him out was because the thing that happened in 1996, they accidentally did the right thing. By accident. And I like that, but I definitely also like the fact that, they sent him unprepared. They sent a prisoner who is not prepared, who has no training whatsoever into these types of things. We're going to assume out of desperation. expendability, because God knows what happened to the other ones. We hear before this that anyone that goes out on these expeditions never come back. And we get the sense the reason why they never come back is as soon as they do come back, if they come back, they go straight into the time machine. And then, of course, so, and that makes you wonder, okay, so what happens to them in the time machine? I mean, where are these people being sent? What fates are them? And in some instances, you get the idea that the street people that you see in in the 90s are the people that were the time travelers. They do kind of also set up that as well. But what would you say about 1990, and especially kind of how he makes a mistake? And the thing is that we could see this mistake happening to anyone, right? You make one small mistake, you make one wrong move, the police are all over you, and especially since you say that you're from the future, you're going into the loony bin, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And go ahead.
Well, so a couple things with that. So what we were talking about earlier was the fact that we don't know if this is a self-fulfilled prophecy at this point, or if what they're doing is actually helping, right? Because when you're watching the movie and you're going through everything, that first mess up by the scientists to go into 1990 and that first interaction with Brad Pitt's character then sets off literally everything else. But is that because of what they were doing, or was this going to happen anyway? Is he actually changing anything? And I think that's an interesting idea to be able to reckon with throughout the entire movie, because then you even see when he goes back to the actual correct time after being thrown into World War I and getting shot in a bunker in World War I, or a trench in World War I. Mm-hmm. Just shows up naked in the middle of the mustard gas, everything. How he survived, I still have no idea. But it's interesting because then you see the doctor, the psychiatrist, and she has this whole idea, this whole theory now about the end of the world, and the idea that this is going to be something that she needs to reckon with because she keeps seeing these patterns throughout history as well. And we're seeing that kind of in real time and seeing that whole way through, where I think it's the Cassandra complex that she talks about. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's great storytelling to pretty much put everything out there and for you to be able to piece everything together throughout your watching experience.
Well, I'm going to kind of double back to what you said just before that, with the whole that everything that is set up in this movie goes back to 19. Her obsession with psychosis throughout history comes from her interactions with Cole. And because of how he talked about time travel, and how how adamant he was about his story, and the fact that there is at least a little bit of plausibility in there, not a whole lot, but especially like the whole Houdini thing that is pulled after he's sedated and put in that little cell, locked up. I mean, completely totally chained up. You can definitely see how the seeds of that affected her. You could see how the seeds of his ramblings set Jeffrey, the Brad Pitt character, into motion. I love the fact that that the film goes so far out as to provide these avenues to set the major characters up, while at the same time Cole is, if he would have landed in 1996, considering what he knew, he would have been taken more seriously. If they would have done what they set out to do, they might have been able to actually fix this.
Right.
Because, when he gets to 96, and actually, this is only this time around that I truly appreciated this. So, at the time in 1996, Cole is, I believe, 10, right? Or
yeah, I think so. That sounds about right. Yep.
So meaning that in 1990 he would only be 2 years old. He wouldn't know anything about what was going on in the world, but he was old enough to remember things that happened to him in 1996, including the boy in the well.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, any 90s kid knows about kids caught in wells. It happened like every other weekend. But again, though, I love the fact that if he would have just gone where he was supposed to go on the first time, none of this would have happened.
Yeah, it's interesting because then Jeffrey wouldn't have had that idea in his head, and it wouldn't have barreled out of control. And I will say too, so Brad Pitt playing Jeffrey is one of my favorite performances from him. Mm-hmm. And he's coming off of Interview with a Vampire. Mm-hmm. He's coming off of Seven, and he's coming off of, I think, Legends of the Fall, maybe?
I want to say that Legends of the Fall, yeah, it was about that time.
So he's playing definitely against type in this movie all the way through. And to have those nervous tics in there, which I read that Gilliam he tried getting him to do a couple things and he just took his cigarettes away. Mm-hmm. And that got him the performance that you see there. But he was able to do so much with that character all the way through. And you see that. You can see later on when Bruce Willis sees him at the party, mm-hmm. When he's all dressed up, he's being a little eccentric, but then everything starts clicking again. And you can see that everything's hidden underneath there with that performance. And I just absolutely loved it. So I wanted to say that before we forgot, because that's one of the bright spots for me for Brad Pitt all the way through, is that he goes balls to wall with that performance. And you don't see that really in any of the other films that he is in.
Well, no, actually, I disagree completely. And in fact, I will say that this movie and this performance is why we have the Brad Pitt that we have, and why Brad Pitt is capable of making us believe in him in every movie that he's in. And the reason why I say that is because this is not what we up to this particular point. Brad Pitt was playing smooth operators. He was playing, even Detective Mills in Seven. He was playing pretty much the straight guy, or a straight enough character. He didn't have jagged edges. And so for this character, he wasn't the lead. He was a supporting character. But at the same time, he made that character the most important character
Yep.
And it's off of his performance. We can believe that Jeffrey Goyens would at one moment be in a mental institution, and the next moment be the son of a notable scientist who is capable of rallying an environmentalist group, an animal rights group, to set off the agenda of the Army of the 12 Monkeys. We can believe that with what Brad Pitt's doing here. And I love that he is both unhinged, but he also is capable of holding it together just enough to fool people into thinking that he has an idea of what he's doing.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is the brilliance of this performance. And from there, if you could actually tie this into what he will do in stuff like Fight Club, you can see the origins of his other characters. Benjamin Button will definitely have this aspect to it as well. You can see where he's capable of taking a straight and narrow character, and be able to find an avenue to give it edge. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, say what you will about it. I think it's a great movie, in my opinion. But see what he does in that movie. He takes a suave kind of dashing spy, and he gives it some bite. He gives it that Brad Pitt kick, You know, you could, like with Inglourious Basterds, he basically took his impersonation of John Wayne and Robert Mitchum and a little bit of Sterling Hayden, and he turned it into Aldo motherfucking Raines. Okay? I mean, the guy has maybe 7 scenes in the movie. He fools us into thinking that the movie is about him. And that is, I think, a brilliant thing. And of course, we can't not talk about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I mean, he makes these characters unique. And he's one of those kind of like, you think of him as a pretty boy at the beginning. But then you really look at his work and dig into it. And you realize, no, this guy's taking chances and choices for his characters that are going to bring you to your knees.
Have you seen California?
I have seen California.
So that came out in 93. That came out 2 years before 12 Monkeys. And I was thinking about that kind of performance where he went a little bit against type with that one too. But he was still a pretty fledgling actor with that. That was, I think, one of his first ones that came into like heavy distribution.
Yeah.
So I think you're right that he always chooses really good roles. And he does, you forget that he can still fully act because he has such iconic, look at Snatch, right? So he has such iconic like physical presence. And then he also has kind of that image of he is that heartthrob all the way through, right? But he tends to play against it a little bit, and I like that about him. I just think that with 12 Monkeys that he did something that he still hasn't really duplicated ever. Mm-hmm. I think Snatch may come close to it because he fully commits to that role and he sinks all the way to it. But you can believe that he's definitely just like a regular patient in a mental institute in 12 Monkeys.
Yeah. And I get what you're saying. And in a way, I think that's actually for the best. Because this could be one of those roles that he could be typecasted in. God knows how many other actors do something like this, and they're playing the same role over and over and over again. Brad Pitt has the luxury of being pretty. So whenever it comes to Hollywood, he can still just play the pretty guy. And he would be fine with that. But the thing is that he doesn't just sit on those laurels.
Right.
He will take that pretty boy and then he will find a way to manipulate it just a little bit to make it his own. And I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest Brad Pitt fan, but I have to recognize that the guy knows how to create characters. I mean,
for
Ocean's
sure.
11. Rusty could have easily just been the sidekick. You know, he could have just been Danny Ocean's lapdog. But he isn't. And I gotta respect how they set up Rusty in that movie and how they allow him to give it his own little bit, to make him his own unique character. And a lot of that has to be Brad Pitt's choices as an actor. And for this particular film, for 12 Monkeys, I have to admire really where it feels like with every scene that he has, he knows exactly where in Jeffrey's life he is. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Brad Pitt made a timeline of Jeffrey's life from the moment he was born to the moment he dies. And he kind of has this pathway that he knows from scene to scene. Okay, Jeffrey's going to act like this because he's at this particular stage of his life or of his mission. So he's going to act a little bit more cautious. He's going to act a little bit more rash. He's already won, so he can act as crazy as he wants because no one's going to do anything about it. And that's the thing that I really like about how, and I feel like Gilliam, I'm going to give Terry Gilliam a lot of credit for casting Brad Pitt here. because you have to know that Brad Pitt can do something like, because if you just had a regular pretty boy in this role, would this have worked?
No, because you wouldn't have been able to get that performance.
Yeah. So you have to be able to trust that your actor is capable of going as balls deep into this as he does. And I gotta say, Gilliam has done this many times before. He is very good at finding actors and being able to get them to go in places that they themselves didn't. And he even did it up to last year when he had Adam Driver giving another one of, and understand last year was a great year for Adam Driver, but yeah. I don't know if you saw the Man Who Killed Don Quixote.
No, I missed that one. Gilliam's standout is Fear and Loathing with Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro.
He made Johnny Depp, let's be honest here.
Yeah. Yeah. And then who is the blonde kid? Is that Elijah Wood? Or no, that's the other one. It's Spider-Man.
McGuire. Yeah, that's what to say.
Yeah. I always mix those two up, but the fact that he just has like that bleach blonde hair and it is just silly. But yeah, to your point, I mean, he pushes his people and he's getting these performances out of them that you don't think about and that are so iconic. If you were to just watch Johnny Depp movies now and not go back into the earlier parts of his catalog, you would never know that something like that is just sitting there waiting for you to just change your whole perspective of him.
Yeah. And okay, so we're kind of jumping up and down around the timeline here a little bit. Another thing that I really liked about how it ties in, especially the 1990 and 1996 things, is the way that they play out the Florida Keys. Yeah. Part of me does wonder, like, is that one of those types of commercials that you honestly think would be able to keep a 6-year ad campaign? I feel like that would not be one of those campaigns that you would dust off the mothballs for 6 years later.
I don't know. I mean, you see like the regular TV ads, right, that have been playing for years and years and years. Maybe it's a radio, so I don't know. That I would imagine that they would have to flip it around every once in a while. But I like every element of this movie is fully thought out, and every little thing in there I feel like has a bigger part to play. So whether it's like the radio commercial that takes effect all the way through, and the Florida Keys being such a big part of that, where he's never seen really the light, he's never seen a beach, he's never seen the ocean. Having that be that sense of hope in there and that carry all the way through, I think is just a tremendous job. And to have that where he's in the car and is like, oh, that's speaking to me, because he's never heard this before. Or he hasn't heard it in such a long time. He's been in a cage for as long as we know, 20, 30 years, depending on
for antisocial sex. Wow, I'm sorry, but I can't help but feel like the punishment does not fit the crime.
It's just wild, but. Yeah, if you think about it, you're in there for 20 to 30 years. You've lost all sense of yourself and sense of the world, and the world's gone. You don't know what's happening into it, and so when you're going back in time and you're hearing all this stuff, you're reliving it. You have no idea. These dreams that you're having, they're actually memories that are getting tied into all the time travel stuff that you're doing, and I loved every second of it, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. All right. So, again, the 1990 stuff pretty much sets up the things that will drive the narrative. It sets up Jeffrey. It sets up Dr.
Rayleigh.
Dr. Rayleigh. Because I wanted to keep saying Riley.
Right. Yeah. Because it's R-E, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So Dr. Rayleigh, it sets up kind of the fact that by the time he gets into 1996, he's got a record and people are looking for him. Which, I mean, okay, let's be honest here. The worst that he does is he puts a couple of guards in the hospital. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a bad thing. But do you see them, like, seriously cracking down on a homeless, mentally ill person like that? Or you know, I guess, you know, the whole kidnapping thing probably, you know, especially since he kidnapped the doctor that had him, or that was investigating him 6 years ago. But to me, as like, I have to admit that again, there does seem to have that element of punishment meets the crime type thing. But when we get into the 1996 aspect of the movie, this shows the brilliancy of the payoff. Right? This is how you pay off things that you set up in the other acts of the movie. About half the movie is done in 1996. So everything that up to this point is basically is to set up. 1996 is going to be the payoff. And this is where I'm starting to realize, especially all the way up from the title credits, one of the inspirations for 12 Monkeys is definitely Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah.
And specifically Vertigo. Now I have to ask, how familiar are you with Vertigo or of any Hitchcock film?
I'm familiar with a couple Hitchcock films, but not Vertigo. I've seen The Birds. I've seen some of the other classics in there, but I have not seen Vertigo.
Well, that is definitely one of those that is going to be talked about on Art House Legends, because we've done The Birds and we've done Psycho so far, and I am the biggest Hitchcock fan. So, that is a thing that's going to happen. That said, though, one thing that Vertigo as a film is about it's psychological in the aspect of getting into human frailty when it comes to what we remember, how we remember, and how people can manipulate our memory. And so 12 Monkeys is definitely taking a page out of this from Cole, because Cole knows his mission. The drugs are what messes him.
Right.
His wounds and the manhunt is, again, we're not up to the World War II or the World War I bullet in 1917. I'll be honest here, I kind of wish that it didn't reveal. I like it in the aspect that it shows that Madeleine Stowe has been, that Dr. Rayleigh has been pursuing Cole, and that her entire thing, because it's in her book that she sees the picture of Cole in it. Yeah. That she's been pursuing him throughout these 6 years through her work. So I do like that part. But the thing is that by knowing that he was actually in World War I and seeing him take the bullet, instead of just seeing him get shot and then being told that it's World War what kind of bullet it is, and then seeing the picture, you know, because at that particular point you could say you could still say, okay, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but but maybe he wasn't in World War. There are ways that you could make that more distinctive, because I feel like as soon as it becomes very clear that he is in fact a time traveler, then it streamlines things maybe a little bit too much for a Terry Gilliam movie. For another type of director, that's kind of what I want. Terry Gilliam, I feel like his movies work best when they're ambiguous.
I think, though, that it highlights two things.
What's that?
One...
I can't hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you said 1 second. Anyway, so I think it highlights two things. So for me, it highlights the incompetencies of the scientist. Mm-hmm. Because that got set up beforehand where science isn't an exact science, especially for these clowns, where he gets, it's not 1996, it's 1916, it's 1917, whatever it is, right? So I think that sets it up to where we see that, and that hits us, and then we see the picture in the book, and that hits us again, and we're going through it. because as an audience, we're living through the psychiatrist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anything that the psychiatrist does, we're on board for. And then getting that call from Detective Stabler with hair, a young Detective Stabler with hair, that it's the bullet. Like, that's the turning point for us. Like, we're already kind of there, right? And I think, to your point, that they probably could have skipped that whole scene and had it kind of hit with those Detective Stabler call and the book, but it's still not as impactful as seeing it in there and realizing that these scientists really have no idea what they're doing.
I really actually kind of give you a point on this one, from a slightly different angle. One thing that I think this kind of works at, and then I'm willing to concede, is that it does make you wonder, what if the crazy person on the side of the road is in fact a time traveler?
Right.
That we dismiss it because in our minds it's not capable. But what if? And to Gilliam's credit, that would be a question that I could see him actually asking. What if this person who, what if the guy actually is Elvis Presley, who changed skin tone, skin color, and is 20 years younger than he died? I mean,
right.
What if these things? And so yeah, I can kind of give it that, but I think just the suspense works so well up to this particular point. I think that's the thing I'm kind of sad about, is it did so well to set up this, is he really a time traveler or is he not, and leaving it ambiguous on that level, that for them to kind of answer that question so nonchalantly feels just slightly disappointing on that sense, if that makes sense.
Sure, and yeah, I understand that. I think also the other side of that too, though, is building the world again, where that question that you just asked, is that crazy person a time traveler? Is that person that we can't, I can't remember the term for it, but the untrusty narrator, right?
The unreliable narrator.
There you go. That's what I'm looking for. Is that person actually saying the truth? So when we go into 96 and now there's a dude with no teeth and he's talking to him like he knows, or 1990. I don't remember what year it was. It doesn't matter. But that makes it to where, okay, these are people. We keep sending people back into time to try and fix this one event every single time, and most of them just figure it out and stay inside their time to finish their life out. They don't want to be in a cage. Mm-hmm. They don't want to, go back to the future. They want to live right where they're at, because it's better than what happens, a couple years before that or a couple years after that. Yeah. So I think it builds the world a little bit better to have everything kind of hit. So with the scene with the World War I, and then going into him seeing all these images around him in Philadelphia and getting everything pinging right back at him, and then she buys in. Once she buys in, I think it's game time, and then it has one of the more satisfying endings of a movie that I've seen in a while.
All right, we're going to get into the ending in just a moment. Before we get there, though, I do want to bring up a fascinating about the 1996 sections. I like the fact that the relationship between Cole and Dr. Rayleigh is frayed from the beginning, right? Right. It is not a very productive relationship up until a particular point. Basically has to acknowledge that he is what he says he is, with the boy who the boy in the well. I have to admit, it would have been awesome again if we didn't have that 1917, and to have that scene where he says that the boy wasn't in the well, that he was hiding, and then it turns out that he was hiding, because even with that, there is the possibility that he just guessed it, right? That's not definitive proof in itself. Unlike having a World War I bullet in your head, in your side, is more definitive.
Right.
So, so to me, the thing is that when that changes their relationship, and she has to start acknowledging that he is in fact who, and then she just becomes an ally. So she, at that particular point, you could say that we're seeing Stockholm syndrome taking place.
Right. Right.
And so, and again, if it was completely, if it was completely, how do I put this, ambiguous, then we could say, okay, she's actually truly believing a time travel, or she's developed a psychosis of her own, brought on by the trauma and stress of being held hostage by a psychopath, and starts to believe in the things that he's saying. Which, yeah, I'll be honest here, I could see that either Terry Gilliam or
Webb Peoples.
No, the director of Black Swan, Darren Aronofsky.
Yeah.
It's another place where I could see Darren Aronofsky also taking this in that direction. But another thing that they could have done, which would have been kind of cool, is if they would have double cast. Have some of the cast members that are in the future scene play parts in the past, not as the characters from the future as we see near the end, but as completely different people. Think of it as like Wizard of Oz type of casting.
Yeah, I dig that, because then what were they doing before? What were their roles before? Because these people have been around. You know, you're not hundreds of years in the future, you're decades in the future.
Yeah, but what I mean is that at that particular point, then you're asking yourself, okay, are these people really from the future, or is he just that he's taking what in real life and he's vision, and that, you know, again, you can say, okay, maybe they're descendants if you want to believe the time travel, or it's all in his head, and it works on both. But I will say though that when he confronts Jeffrey in 1996, I love the scene. I gotta say, I love the scene, and I love it specifically for Brad Pitt's performance, because Brad Pitt actually goes into 3 phases in this scene, right? The first phase is his eccentric son of a brilliant scientist. He's wearing the rich boy jacket. He's you could almost see him as kind of like a pet to his dad, a little bit. And then of course he is brought to see Cole, who is who's come to see him, and so at that particular point you see a guy that's kind of hiding from his past, hiding from, and then in the third phase, when when Cole attacks him, and then we see the true face of Jeffrey, the true the true insanity that he has inside of him, and I love how he shifts those gears, and this is specifically how Brad Pitt works, and this is why he got nominated for his Academy Award for this performance, because the way he transitions, he is natural. Something that Cole says or something that Cole does naturally shifts his, and I don't know if how they rehearsed this scene. I don't know if that Bruce Willis was aware of but I love how it feels like something that Cole does, or some part of Cole triggers that about him. And because we've already seen him do this in 1990, where he took inspiration from Cole, and you see again the wheels in his head turning and picking up exactly what he's hearing from Cole and taking it to the next step, we're seeing kind of that here too. Because it escalates. Right. It's not that it's changing, it escalates. He becomes more demented throughout this conversation because Cole is triggering that part of him. And
yeah, because he could have been fine for the 5 or 6 years, since meeting Cole in
no, we know that he creates the army of the 12 monkeys between that time. So, no, he is not well, but he's definitely playing a brilliant game. Because remember when they hit up the hippies, right outside the hotel, and the hippies tell him, look, he was over here. We knew that he was a millionaire. He was talking about revolution, and then all of a sudden he switches gears. He goes to his daddy and he says that he was wrong in his. And now we find out later that either A, this did happen and they're extremely forgiving because he's back there, or they lied. But then if they lied, why would they send him directly to Jeffrey? So that's the thing that I find fascinating. But either way, they set up the fact that he's always been moving towards a goal the entire time. He's been very patient this entire time. He was waiting for the right time. And so, and I do love the fact that the virus itself, we thought was the big thing in all this, was completely different. But at the same time, Cole actually was also responsible for that as well. Because Cole sets it up to Dr. Riley. Dr. Riley writes the book. The book inspires David Morse to do what he does. And so, it all still ties back to Cole. Cole is the reason why this entire movie happens.
Which that's that closed loop that I was talking about earlier that I just absolutely love. But what I was going to ask you is, do you think before seeing Cole in 96 that Jeffrey was doing much more than, college riots, trying to just be kind of in a movement of sorts, instead of being fully radicalized and doing something way more dangerous, which he ends up doing after seeing Cole again?
Honestly, what I got from if I were, and again, I'm almost dead certain that Pitt created a timeline for this character, and maybe even Gilliam created a timeline for this character. But in my opinion, what happened was Jeffrey has always been kind of loopy and kind of off his rocker, and his dad sent him to this mental hospital because he was embarrassed. And so at some particular point, Jeffrey was capable of convincing his dad that he was getting better, or perhaps maybe Christopher Plummer really just needed his son back, even though it doesn't seem like they really have any kind of relationship, and might be even slightly embarrassed by him to an extent. Maybe he did it for the tax credits. I don't know. But the thing is that at some particular point, Jeffrey is brought back home, and he's put on a pretty tight. He gets off the leash and creates the army of the 12 monkeys. But then I guess he, at that particular point, realizes what his true plan is going to be. Goes back to his dad and says whatever he needs to get himself back into the inner circle, and is waiting for an opportune moment in order to, which was his overall goal. Which I have to admit, 6 years for that, you'd have to be crazy.
Well, so the interesting part about that though is, why kidnap? Well, I guess to put him in the cage, right? That's his end goal. So it's interesting to me that because of Cole, now the psychiatrist is reaching out to Jeffrey's dad and talks about this plan, and then you have you said David Morris. Being there the entire time. He's really the mastermind of everything, which he's such a quiet character through this whole movie. It's really great to see. And then for me, seeing the movie before, knowing how it ends, and then watching him at that first book signing was a little treat for me because I was like, oh yeah, that's the guy. He's going to mess up everything. So I think that was cool. But having him kind of just show up in little bits and pieces, but it's interesting to see in the van, that scene where Jeffrey was like, holy shit, I could have done something completely different. Mm-hmm. I could have had access to way different stuff. I could have done way more, and all I'm doing is thinking about this zoo, and I guess I can't do anything else because he doesn't have the codes anymore, so I'm just going to release all the animals like I originally planned.
But one thing I admire about all of this is that if you go back to that scene where we're introduced to David Morse at the book signing, he's fucking crazy. But he does it in such a way that it's just slightly there. Like it's like you really have to pay attention to what he said to truly to truly realize this guy is crazy. And the thing is that at that point we don't know that he's a he's a scientist. He talks about how he's inspired by your work, but we don't realize that he's an actual lab technician. Up until we see him in the doctor or in a post Christopher Plummer's lab, and by that particular point, if you're not paying attention to what he said to her at the book signing, you don't really catch on until he shows up at the airport,
right?
And so, and at that particular point, he looks all crazy, but he was looking all crazy the entire time. That was the thing that I love. I love about how because there's so much attention put onto Jeffrey. That is the best bait and switch I think I would say of all the 90s, with the exception of maybe Silence of the Lambs. Silence of the Lambs. Sure, that's a technicality because it was 1990. But 12 Monkeys, great bait and switch.
Yeah, because you think that it is going to be Jeffrey, and everybody thinks that it's Jeffrey. Everybody thinks this is the 12 Monkeys, and it's not. It's completely different, and I really, really like that. And I don't know, though, if does that go back to the scientists don't know all the little details.
Well, that's the whole
and again,
point. The whole point of the investigation was that they're investigating what caused the virus, and of course, if you see spray paints going around saying "we did it," I mean, let's be honest here, that makes it pretty clear, or at least to any indication, especially if there was a virus that happened immediately after. Yeah, this was tied in with that we did it, especially if you have absolutely no records of what happened. So I'm just gonna say. But after we figure out kind of where this is going to go and that they actually intend to plan to stop the virus, I understand why they did it, but I feel like it's trying now to be a time travel movie.
Right.
And I don't know how I feel about that because I love time travel movies. But this movie did such a good job of really making you question the characters' motives. To all of a sudden give them a genuine mission like this. Feels like it's dumbing itself down a little.
Well, again, it's Cole's fault. It's that mission report that he gives. He already got his tooth out, off the advice of the homeless guy that doesn't remember him. It's all of his fault. Everything that he does, he brings it upon himself. So I think it's a good way to kind of like Deus Ex Machina the whole thing, right? It's like, this is legit time travel. We got it. You're it. Everybody from the future is coming back now. So we're going to go ahead and fix this. We're going to nip it in the bud right now. We're going to save, humanity right now. And it's a great scene. Mm-hmm. At the airport, you have his cellmate come back in, mm-hmm. So that was a really cool thing. Where again, I don't think anything was wasted. Everything was set up, and there was a payoff for every single thing in the movie.
Okay, there's two things. There's three things I'm going to say saves the third act for me. I said why I was a little disappointed, but I'm going to say the three things that really saved the third act. One, we talked about how the incompetence of the people in charge is noticeable throughout the film. But another thing that I have to appreciate about what Terry Gilliam does here is they actually get better as the movie goes on. Or at least they get closer to being competent than they were at the beginning. Because, remember, when they only pull him out of 1990 after they got the message from 1996.
Right.
All right? So that is a 6-year gap in the situation. So the next time that he calls, or they send him to 1996, and then he makes the call. They actually get the time right. So they send Jose to meet him roughly 10 minutes after he makes the call. Vastly better.
Yeah, and also, just sorry to interrupt, but also the call that the psychiatrist makes, that also solidifies it for Outside of the Bullet. Mm-hmm. Because then they pick that up, they play that for him, send him right back, and now he's in on everything, and he knows too, and they're getting better. That gives you kind of an idea that they're getting better, they're getting more accurate through it, and then next thing you know, you see his cellmate. Honestly,
I'll be honest here. If they would have removed the or at least reduced the importance of the 1917 moment, and made that the big reveal, that kind of like how you couldn't have known that, I think that would have been better.
Yeah, I think that would have hit a lot more.
Yeah. The fact that it plays too late, in my opinion. It's like they had to pay it off in order to get the next phone call correct, but to me it needed to come a little bit sooner. That said, like I said, there's 3 things. So the phone call sets it up. The fact that Cole fails, and the fact that he knew he was going to fail since he was a child. Also a great thing that saves this ending. And then the last thing when it comes to the government in charge, having other agents in the airport just in case he fails. Or as the lady says, being the insurance. That to me, again, the idea that they aren't, that they tell him or they convince themselves that they can't really change the past, yet they're going to try to change the past. And not only are they going to try to change the past, but they're going to send as many agents to this moment to stop it. And the thing is, technically speaking, we already know they fail. And we know that because David Morse opened the vial in front of the the customs agent. Or the baggage search person. So the virus is already out by the time they get to him. I mean, it's wild, yeah. Now, we don't know exactly the communicability rate. It might have just been, Philadelphia that's destroyed by the virus. Highly unlikely, because it is still an airport and it will travel everywhere. Yep. But at the same time, though, we already know that this is a failed mission from the beginning. Because he opened the vial. The vial is open. No one stopped him. Yeah, and it makes you think that, can you go back and change your past? Or is everything going to be what it is? You can't do anything to go back and fix it. And even... I always like the lady on the plane, as far as, I do insurance. And you think that's going to be enough, but they don't know that it's already out. Mm-hmm. And it's just another kind of misstep for them, and maybe they're able to go back and do it again until they get it right. I'm going to make a proposal regarding how to look at this film in the idea of time travel. The film is the final word of how the history goes. So, if we see the vial being opened, it's not going to change because the film shows it. The reason why the history might have been able to be changed if Cole was able to get to where he was supposed to be and to stop it is if we see him actually do it in the film, but we don't see him do it in the film. So the final record is he dies. All of humanity dies because the virus was Maybe it won't take as long. Maybe it will take longer. We don't know exactly this. But the virus is released. Game over. And to me, that works. Because in Terry Gilliam's world, there is no such thing as happy ending. Maybe acceptable endings is one. But, I mean, even in, like, Time Bandits, he couldn't even give you a happy ending there. I mean, and that's a children's movie.
Dying in front of your own child's self has to be pretty rough.
It is. And it's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, here, the rest of your life, you're remembering this person dying in front of you and this lady, right? And you have this image that's stuck with you. And all you do is see the kid go out to the parking lot, go into a car, and you know, that's it. And then you realize, holy shit, that kid is now going to die in front of himself over and over and over. Like, this is his timeline. You know, that's it for him.
That's only because Joseph Gordon-Levitt wasn't around, man. Just saying. You're the one that brought up the closing the loop. I'm just closing it for you.
Yeah. He doesn't have a younger self going to shoot himself. Yeah.
No, he's too young to shoot himself.
Yeah, right. I don't know. That last scene in the or not the last scene, but the scene in the airport always stuck with me every time that I watched it, and it's just, you know, him getting shot, all the colors, because you think that it's going to be a hopeful ending, right? You are praying that it's going to be their plane. They're going to be able to take off. They're going to be able to go. And then all of it goes to hell, and it's all right in front of him. And then you piece everything together that all these dreams that he's had for the past 20 or 30 years has been himself dying.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to talk about these endings right quick, because believe it or not, Gilliam wanted to end the movie with the eye contact between the boy and Dr. Riley. That was where he wanted to end the movie. But he was instructed to create an alternate ending and to run it for test audiences. So he actually created two. One was was on the airplane with the lady, the future lady, who's there for the insurance, and the other was Cole going out to the park, going to the car, and test audiences loved both endings, loved them both when it was just themselves, not together. And so Gilliam decided, in fact, put both of those endings in, but he specifically made sure to end it on young Cole's eyes, because the movie begins on young Cole.
Right.
So he tied that back together as a motif. And I honestly, it works.
Yeah.
I got to give it to him. It works. And not many things that a test audience tells you actually works, but it does, right?
Yeah, every once in a while you strike gold, right? Every once in a while the masses actually know what they want.
That's true.
Yeah.
All right, so is there anything else we want to talk about with 12 Monkeys before we go ahead and rate it?
Not really. I want to say that every actor came to play. You know, even what is her name? Madeleine
Stowe?
Yeah, she's phenomenal in this. I love it. And being the audience surrogate throughout everything, you know, I thought was just a really good job. And we talked a lot about Bruce Willis, and we talked a lot about Brad Pitt, but I think that she was there throughout the entire movie doing her best all the way through, and was able to be a shining light with it as well.
All right, so let's go ahead and do we'll do Geek Sheet right quick and move on. Okay, so we talked quite a bit about Brad Pitt, so I think we can go ahead and cross him off. Bruce Willis, no one's ever heard of him before or since, so we don't have to talk about him too much, do we?
No, we don't.
Yeah, just the whole Die Hard, Pulp Fiction. We've talked about on this podcast before. We could talk about Unbreakable, Glass, where
and he just dies in a puddle.
Hey,
yeah.
Spoilers.
Oh,
spoilers.
Whatever. Sorry. Watch the movie. Enjoy it.
But Yeah, I mean, yeah, Bruce Willis is in himself. Madeleine Stowe, she's one of those actresses that I love watching because she just has so much. But outside of like shortcuts where she's doing a Robert Altman movie, or Last of the Mohicans where she's playing an American Brit, yeah, I find the accent, but it does have Wes Studi, so that's why I'll always watch it. But it's like I can't really think of like a performances outside of geeky.
Well, I also that she doesn't do that much outside of this. This is probably her biggest movie outside of Last of the Mohicans, right?
She was on that Revenge show for like 8 seasons.
I don't know what that is.
It was about a woman who gets revenge on the family that destroyed her family.
So like Monte Carlo or something?
Kind of.
Okay.
Peggy Carter's stepniece.
Yeah.
She's
Okay.
the one who gets the revenge, and Madeleine Stowe's the matriarch of the family that she's.
Oh, okay. All right.
But yeah, I'm gonna just throw out a couple of ones I really wanted to talk about. Frank Gorshin, the doctor that Dr. Rayleigh is kind of her protege, or the one that she's learning from. You know who Frank Gorshin is, right? Come on, please tell me you know Frank Gorshin.
I know the name, and I've seen that face. I just don't know.
I got one for you.
I don't know.
Riddle me this. What is that fantastically phantasmal guy that constantly baffles the 1966 Batman and Robin?
The Joker? But
dude!
I don't know these things. I'm terrible. What do you want from me?
Riddle me this.
Oh, well, I mean, I guess the Riddler.
He is the Riddler. He was the original Riddler.
I didn't think that there was... Okay. that makes me feel dumb, but I didn't think that there was yeah, I'm just going to skip that. Don't listen to me. I don't know anything about movies. Why am I on the show?
Okay. Hey, I've done it myself, okay? Everyone does, but no. And what I find hilarious is that, believe it or not, Frank Gorshin has actually been more characters, or has also been Doctor Strange, Dr. Hugo Strange, in the Batman TV animated show. So he's done double duty in Gotham.
Okay.
But he's Frank Gorshin is the most when I saw his name on there, I was like, wait, the Riddler is in this movie? I didn't recognize it. I watched Frank Gorshin before I saw 12 Monkeys, so I was feeling especially stupid on that one. But I also want to talk about we kind of mentioned Christopher Plummer, but I feel like we really need to talk about Christopher Plummer for just a moment. I mean, this guy is a genuine badass, right?
Yeah.
I mean, first off, can we not mention the patriarch of the Thrombey family at all? Can we?
Yeah.
I mean, Knives Out. He was genuinely one of the great things about that. And understand, there's a lot of great things about Knives Out, and I think he has maybe 6 minutes of screen time. Maybe
he doesn't have that much. Yeah, he doesn't have that much, but he was one of my favorite characters in it.
This dude had to replace Kevin Spacey on All the Money in the World. He had 2 weeks to prepare for a massive role where he was taking on, I want to say, 20 minutes of screen time in himself.
Yeah.
And I gotta say right now, he would have been better than Kevin Spacey in the role. I mean, just straight up. I mean, that was a badass performance in that movie. He's got so much. He's a freaking Von Trapp, for crying out loud. I mean, yeah, he hated every moment of being a Von Trapp, but he was a Von Trapp all the same. I mean, he was even a character in Skyrim. If you can believe that.
That's crazy.
Yes, he's done. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I could go on and on about Christopher Plummer, and I'm pretty sure Christopher Plummer would love every minute of me giving credit to Christopher Plummer. But there is one other name I really want to talk about, and that is the fucking amazing cinematography in this movie. And that is by a guy named Roger Pratt. Roger Pratt, I've actually talked about in considerable detail in prior episodes, specifically The Fisher King, which is another Terry Gilliam. But did you know that Mr. Pratt here was also the cinematographer to 3 of the Harry Potter movies?
Really?
Yes.
Which ones?
The first 3. Actually, no. First 2 and Goblet of Fire.
Huh. Okay.
And he did Troy. And, well, it might not matter to you at all, but for me, this is a pretty badass movie. Year of the Comet.
Yeah, I don't know that one. It's a blind spot for me.
Okay, yeah. Year of the Comet is a zombie movie that is better than a zombie movie.
All right.
That's all I'm going to say. It's a great movie. Also, he was the cinematographer for Batman, the original the original Tim Burton Batman, which... That is
a very varied movie selection, first of all. Like, those are really different projects all the way through. Because we talked a little bit about the boxed in and the kind of the claustrophobic shots of previous movies, and he does such a good job in the mental institution and that common room, making you feel everything up close and looking at those different angles. One of my favorite little parts about it is I forget his name, but the guy from I'm Not From Outer Space, I'm Not an Alien, and then he's just wearing a tux, but then also bunny slippers, which is fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, I love that attention to detail too. By the way, I also forgot he also did Brazil, and one of the best looking of the Monty Python film skits from The Meaning of Life, the insurance company building pirates.
Oh yeah.
That he was the cinematographer for that segment.
That's awesome.
Which, if I'm not correct, was in fact directed by Terry Gilliam, which makes a whole.
Yeah.
All right, so that out of the way, Chris, do you agree with the critics on 12 Monkeys? Do you give it a pass? Do you give it a fail? Or do you give it a maybe?
A big ol' pass. This movie has... I remember seeing it when I was a teenager, and this being like my first foray. I don't know how to say that word. But my first kind of introduction to weirder movies. And the fact that this made a big impact in the box office in 95 just makes me feel even better that, you know, people like art and were able to really push the envelope. And this has, ever since it first came out, it wasn't like Blade Runner where it took a while for it to build popularity. You know, 12 Monkeys has been a big staple, and this is such a really good introduction to open up your mind about what cinematography can be, what acting can be, what storytelling can be, and just the way that everything sets up and every little setup is paid off throughout the movie. I can't say enough about it. I love it.
And I'm going to say that when it comes to Terry Gilliam films, Brazil is so by far it is the best Terry Gilliam film. But that's not to say that 12 Monkeys isn't a unique and challenging that is not perfect. It's not the best that it could be. But I will say that for what it is, it does good stuff, and it gives you a lot to think about. And it ends in a way that is satisfying while at the same time a little baffling. And I like that. This is kind of what I believe Terry Gilliam films aim to. And when Terry Gilliam has got a great ending in mind, it is a brilliant ending. You know, I talked about with Brazil. I've talked about with Fisher King. I haven't talked about Baron Munchausen. Yeah, we haven't done that movie yet. But I would say the same thing about Baron Munchausen. And I especially love the ending of The Man Who Killed Don Quixote. That ending was great. And so there's a lot that I love about how this film takes what Terry Gilliam knows best, and it takes what David Webb Peoples does best, and it really gets into those characters' mind frame and mindsets, and it really makes you think about them in a very unique way. And like Jeffrey Goins, in my opinion, I would not be surprised if Christopher Nolan and Todd Phillips both looked at this character when they were thinking about the Joker, because you can see in both of those reiterations the madness of Jeffrey Goins a lot. And I'm gonna say that Brad Pitt deserved every accolade that he got for this movie, because this was fantastic. And I would say that the weakest link is probably Madeleine Stowe, just a little bit, because she really didn't sell me on the fear aspects. I think it would have been better if her character would have maybe getting a thrill out of this more than trying to make us think scared for her life. Mm-hmm. That might have been a better direction to go with it, or at least if you had with Madeleine Stowe, because she doesn't do damsel in, and for some reason people try to make her the damsel in distress. She just does not do that. She's just too strong a personality. Like, she's more of a femme fatale, or like I wouldn't go so far. Like, in her prime, she would have been a great first. I could definitely see that in her. You know, when she becomes the accomplice, yeah, absolutely. When we get into that point where she's working with Cole, I believe that part. But before then, it doesn't work. But that's the closest thing to a serious criticism that I have. Other than the fact that I think it would have been kind of cool. And it's more that I think it would have been kind of cool if it was still ambiguous as to whether he was a time traveler or not. But that wasn't the direction they went. They went this direction, and it worked. So I'm giving this a pass.
Cool.
All right, so Chris, where can people find you on the internet?
You guys can find me on Ambition Radio podcast. I interview people that have found their balance between life, family, career, and the pursuit of their passions, dreams, or hobbies. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I don't use Twitter. I don't believe in it. So just find me on there. Drop me a like. Drop me a hi. See if you want to be interviewed. I'm always looking for new guests. And you can find me there, and I'll be ready and willing to talk, because I haven't done that much throughout this whole quarantine thing.
And if you're looking for more Art House Legends goodness, you can always go onto iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, everywhere that you find your local podcast. You can go there. You can check out our YouTube channel. You can go onto our Twitter at Art House Legends, or Facebook page. Or if you just want to send us a nice little message telling us how you think we're the greatest film podcast in the world, you can do so by going onto arthouselegends@gmail.com and leave a message. Chris, thank you so much for joining me. This is the Movie Dude, Eric.
My name is Chris Tondevold.
And